Right, the show does go on, and with that in mind, there's so much we could have got into tonight. The strikes, though, I think, is where we will start our programme. We've had weeks, haven't we? We've had months of them. It feels like years and years and years. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, but it also feels perhaps like the end is in sight. NHS staff now, they are apparently getting up to an 18% pay rise. It depends, obviously, what their starting point is, of course, but some of the other strikes as well. We've seen firefighters, Paul. They've agreed to kind of talks, etc., and offers. Teachers. Is the end of this strikes season in sight, do you think?
Well, certainly in terms of the firefighters' strike, which obviously is relevant to me because it's my profession, that strike has been averted as a result of an improvement in the offer by the National Fire Service employers, and that came about directly as a result of an overwhelming strike ballot that firefighters delivered just a few weeks ago. Really focused the minds of the employers and made them realise that we've got to come up with something more. So I think what it tells us really, Michelle, is despite people within the Conservative government and anti-strike people in the media saying strike action never works, it's disruptive, it will never achieve anything. The truth is that it often does. It often does force employers and governments to move when they otherwise wouldn't do so. And I think we are seeing some movement on the part of the government where they have influence and employers as well as a result of strike action. And that's a good thing. And these things are always settled by negotiation and compromise. No side ever gets what it wants. We in the FBU, Fire Brigades Union, didn't get everything that we wanted by any stretch of the imagination. I guess the bigger question is why was it necessary for unions and workers to feel that they had to take strike action in the first place when it was quite obvious to everybody that real wages were falling quite seriously, still are falling quite seriously, that there is something sick with our economy in terms of, fundamental wealth and income inequality. And that should have been addressed. It should have been addressed a long time ago. So the government, in some cases, is a bit late to the party, but better late than never.
Better late than never. Do you think we're seeing the end?
I certainly hope so, and I think most people in the country will hope so. I think it makes it rather difficult for those people who are still conducting industrial action, still conducting the withdrawal of their labour. I note that the medical unions have, in principle, agreed that an uplift of circa 2% on average to the 3.5 that was already on the table is enough to go back to work. That makes the BMA's request of 35% uplift for the junior doctors seem rather extreme in anyone's view. So I think they're going to have difficulty. I just wanted to pick up on what Paul said, though, because I'm a Conservative. It's because I believe in freedom under the law and the freedom of the individual that I believe in people's right to withdraw their labour. And I think people very easily mislead themselves with caricatures sometimes in politics. But on the other hand, whilst I accept many people withdrew their labour for the reasons Paul was saying, others, it's very clear to me, did so because they saw a political opportunity. And I'm talking about the Mick Lynches of this world who like to bang the table and say, and I paraphrase what he said, it doesn't matter which strike it is, you've got to support it. Everybody out. And when you get to that kind of position, when you're perilously close to the kind of general strike territory, that, Michelle, that's when you find that people are doing things for party political reasons and partisan reasons. I'm not saying Paul did that or his union did, but I'm saying there was certainly more than a whiff of that about.
Well, I accidentally, I grant you that, I found myself in the middle of the protest on Wednesday, right? I was trying my hardest to
Did you have your placard?
No, I was trying to actually get to Doncaster to do the budget.
You weren't crossing the picket line, are you?
Well, no, the protest was going this way, and I was trying to get through it and go that way. And I did see...
as usual.
I was. And I was thinking, I wonder if anyone recognised me off GBNews when I was sitting there saying, don't go on strike and all the rest of it. But anyway, I was quite surprised at how many placards were saying, like, Tory scum, Tories out. And there was like a huge sentiment that was anti-Tory. Do you think that's fair? Because do you look at this and think, actually, this is a Tory issue or not?
Well, let me tell you how it works. I've been involved on the left for many, many years. And what happens whenever there's strike action, which is getting quite a bit of media coverage, you will always get various kind of disparate far-left groups who will hitch their wagons to that particular strike, will turn up on the picket line, will dish out their placards saying Tory scum and Tory out and all the rest of it. Tories out. But these people are usually not representative, certainly not of the wider left more broadly, and certainly not representative of the people taking strike action. So I wouldn't necessarily read too much into the placards that are being waved by the people on the picket lines. I mean, in terms of Alex's point, look, I mean, the RMT isn't even affiliated to the Labour Party. So I reject the idea that it's a party political thing. The RMT has, over recent years, been a very critical voice against the Labour Party. The RMT has been on strike under Labour governments. The Fire Brigades Union, I've been on strike under Labour governments. So I don't accept that it's purely about, look, the Tories are in, let's hold a strike because we want to get rid of them, when they've been on strike under Labour governments as well. I also don't accept, by the way, that the vast majority of people, I'm not saying you were saying this, but I don't believe the vast majority of people who are taking strike action at the moment are doing so because they have any political designs.
No, I meant the leadership. I didn't mean people.
No, I accept that. Because these disputes don't come out of a clear blue sky. They are a direct consequence of the economic landscape in which people are finding themselves. You know, the biggest squeeze on workers' wages since Napoleonic times, falling real wages, crashing living standards and so on. So it is no surprise that in those circumstances you will get more and more people willing to say, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm suffering financially. The economy isn't working for me. I'm prepared to take strike action in order to try to rectify the problems that I'm facing at the moment. That's the reality of why people are taking action.
The issue on cost of living is apparent, I think, to all of us. So if I do what's interesting and pick on the point of dispute between us, I think Paul and I aren't quite on the same page about the rhetoric. I, of course, accept that people who are motivated enough to go on a rally and hold up a placard are almost by definition not representative of the broader voting population, because most of us don't, for better or worse. Perhaps it would be better if we did all go out and voice our political views in the street, but most people don't. So I accept your premise that most people aren't as driven as that. But the tendency to call Tories evil, the tendency to say, you know, Tories are scum, never kissed a Tory in their bio, you know, Tories out, hate Tories, that is a far more prevalent thing on the left than it is on the right. You don't, I mean, the people on the right tend to think that people on the left are mistaken or are under a misapprehension about how the world works, are perhaps naive, and may, because of those things, lead to bad government. But you don't think they're evil. And the reverse is not the case. So there is an asymmetry that I think is broader than a small group that Paul was talking about.
I think that's fair, actually. I think that's a reasonable point. I often have arguments with people on the left who think they are, when it comes to the politics, think they are inherently better people than people on the other side of the argument. And often, actually, they are people I would not particularly want to associate with on a personal level, because they themselves are driven by nastiness and unpleasantness and sectarianism.
Say something fair to Paul. The people who do that tend not to be the old left, actually, who don't mind a political ding-dong on the issues and then may go into government, come out of government, sit in opposition and do their best as a loyal opposition. The most extreme in the modern age tend to be a kind of new left liberal movement who regard themselves as so tolerant they cannot tolerate any other perspective.
I find that hilarious. And by the way, a lot of this comes from the very top, by the way, because everyone, I'm sure, will remember Angela Rayner's rant when she was going, I mean, she was apoplectic, wasn't she, with rage almost, going on about scum and racist and all the rest of it.
Now, the thing is, Michelle, and we saw the thing with Lucy Powell, the Labour frontbencher last year, where she was wearing the T-shirt, never kissed a Tory. Now, that's student politics, I think. That has no place in mainstream, adult, grown-up parliamentary politics. But the point is, for the Labour Party, if they are serious about forming a government, they have to win Tory voters. They have to win Red Wall voters who have gone to the Tories and people outside of the Red Wall who currently vote Tory, and they've got to win their hearts and minds. And you're not going to do that by calling Tories scum or by saying that you would never kiss one. If people in the Red Wall and elsewhere who have decided to vote Tory see the Labour Party referring to them, because they will infer that they're talking about them in those sorts of derogatory terms, it's no wonder they will say, sorry, I'm not going to be casting my ballot for you. That seems to me pretty obvious.
And I think you see it on social media, don't you? Because you get, I mean, anyone that uses Twitter will probably have been abused at some point in their lives. And it always makes me laugh when you get all this abuse and you click on the profile to see who's doing it, and it always says, hashtag be kind.
Yeah,
and it's like, what you really mean is be kind to everyone that you agree with, and heaven forbid you dare come across someone that you disagree with. Well, all bets are off. You can do what you want with them.
That's right. And some of that vitriol, by the way, is reserved for other people on the left, so it's left-on-left hostility, and it's the most dogged left person who doesn't think that, in their words, Blairite, or the person who should F off and join the Tories, doesn't think they're sound enough. You know, if you tell someone to F off and join the Tories long enough, sometimes they do.
One of my viewers, Stephen, has just been in touch saying, Michelle, I think you're missing the point, you lot. Many working people in a union already vote Tories. They are Tories. Not every union member, he says, is Labour. You are, of course, right. Tony says, can you ask the panel, would the strikes have happened if Labour were in government? And do they think they'd get a better offer under Labour than Tory? Do you reckon this would have all happened if Labour were in charge, Paul?
Yeah, I think they probably would have done. As I said, I've known strike action. I've been on strike under a Labour government. You only have to think of the so-called winter of discontent in the late 70s to see that unions are not reluctant to take on Labour governments when they feel that it's necessary to do so. Yes, I think the strikes would have taken place. I think they would have largely, in most cases, been settled quicker with better offers. That's my view.
I think there would have been some strikes, but it would have depended on the timing in the political cycle. If Keir Starmer, for argument's sake, had just got into government, there would have been a debate within the union movement. On the one hand, we should back off a bit and let them have a bit of space. In a way, some unionists would have thought that, some union leaders would have thought that. In a way, they certainly don't think about the Tories. And others would have said, finally, we've got a real opportunity to capitalise. Now is the time, now is the time. The point is you can have both of those pressures at once. Just as, to take Paul's point about the RMT, you don't have to be pro-Labour to be anti-Tory. There are some people in the militant aspect of the union movement who basically none of the current political leadership will satisfy them. They thought Corbyn was a bit soft.
Yeah, and let's not forget, by the way, that one of the reasons we have the economic situation that we have now is because of all of the prolonged lockdown ridiculousness. And let's not forget that Labour were very uncomfortable with Boris Johnson lifting the regulations at the pace in which he did. So perhaps if Labour were in charge...
There were a lot of unions.
Yeah, you saw what the unions did with schools, for example. So yes, I think is the short answer to your question there. Paul says, using members of public as human shields throughout these negotiations has been disgusting. I have to say, the strike action is something that very much divides you guys at home. Keep your thoughts coming in, whichever